This is episode 366 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am very pleased to be joined this week by Carla Sonntag. She is the CEO of the New Mexico Business Coalition. Welcome to Tipping Point, New Mexico, Carla.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you, Paul.
Yeah, well, it's great to kick off 2022 with you, and we've got a legislative session rapidly approaching. It's kind of the cold slap of water in the face as we enjoy our holidays and head into a new year. There's always the realization that just a few weeks from that time, you're going to be presumably up in Santa Fe, or at least dealing with the legislature. And at least at this point, looks like people will be back in the roundhouse. Is that your assessment, Carla? You think we'll be back in person in the roundhouse for the 30-day session?
I think some people will be. I'm not planning on being there in person. They've got a bunch of new policies that I won't be applying, or I won't be complying with. So I'll be staying away. We hired a lobbyist and he's very capable of handling our needs. And then I can, from what I understand, I'll be able to join by Zoom or other means to testify in committees.
Well, excellent. Yeah, it's a whole new world up there in terms of vaccine mandates, gun restrictions, et cetera. But before we get too deep into our conversation, why don't you share a little bit about what the New Mexico Business Coalition is and some of the work you do?
Well, we're very action oriented. We focus on better business policy for the state. We're followed and joined by individuals as well as business owners. Most people realize that if business is doing well, we're all doing well. But we do write policy. We get laws passed. We've had some huge wins over the last COVID period, helping business. We started the coalition 13 years ago, and the reason that we did it is we didn't feel that business really had a strong enough voice. We needed somebody that was willing to compromise if it made sense for all parties concerned, but not to go along to get along in order to be liked. And so that's where we are a little bit different from other business groups.
Yeah, and you, as you mentioned, do work in the roundhouse. What are some of the issues, I guess, in the past, or anything particular that you see coming up in 2022 that the Business Coalition is going to be engaged on?
Well, we focus a lot on energy because the energy policy impacts all of us and it impacts the state. We've got a lot of people that are focused on shutting down our oil and gas industry. And I don't need to tell you, it's a big part of our budget, and that would impact us in a negative way. Besides the fact that we need that energy for our daily lives. So we do a lot of that. We also work on general business policy. We got a law passed that saved employers, we estimate $1,300 per employee per year on their unemployment insurance. And that has been good, but that fund is still struggling, and they're still trying to raise taxes on employers in that regard. There's new policies like the paid sick leave. We're trying to get that amended in the upcoming session because it is really problematic for a lot of businesses. But then there's new policies coming at us too, and a lot of new tax increases. We generally don't support tax increases unless there's a really good reason to do so. But I think our taxes are high enough in the state, especially when you consider the value that we're getting for the taxes paid. So we're not going to be supportive of tax increases right now.
Before we get back to energy, are you excited, optimistic? Do you think it's kind of irrelevant? What's your take on the governor's gross receipts tax, the modest cut that she's proposed there?
I think it's Well, it's ridiculous. It is just a political ploy, in my opinion. It is not helpful to anyone. It's just a soundbite to say that she did it. And that's great. That is going in the right direction. But at the same time, she's raising other taxes. So our net is going to be a loss in the tax realm if she gets through her agenda. So what we need with a gross receipts tax is a complete rewrite of the system. We have been talking about that for 13 years. The system does not work and it needs to be completely rewritten. And this is the time to do it, because when you rewrite a tax code, a lot of times it is costly to the state. Well, the state has an abundance of cash right now and still federal funds. This is the time to rewrite that tax code. They won't get it done in time for this session, this budgetary session, but what they could do is decide to set aside some money and rewrite the tax code over the next year, put it into effect next year, and have that money there to carry the slack if there is going to be one during that conversion time.
Yeah, we've talked about it at the Rio Grande Foundation as well. The gross receipts tax is fundamentally broken. The pyramiding, the taxation of business inputs on services, et cetera, needs to be addressed, and we need a full-fledged addressing of the gross receipts tax, preferably with a big shift towards a more sales tax oriented situation where you can still maybe tax some of those services, but not the way it is done in New Mexico, which is very economically harmful. And let's talk about energy. One of the things that we've observed about this governor and her policies is that she tends to not want to attack the oil and gas industry, which provides so much of the revenue directly. She tends to do other things that maybe impact consumers or other aspects of New Mexicans' lives. Do you see any specific legislation out there when it comes to this session that'll be dealing with oil and gas industry in a negative way, or anything good? Where do you see that lining up?
Well, first, I would say that I do think she does attack the industry. She gives good lip service to not doing that, but she has her agencies do it. When we just recently had the methane rule hearing, these are all, in my opinion, attacks against the industry, because it is going to be costly to them, which in turn is going to cost all of us. So if you put those policies alongside the federal policies of Biden, we've got some problems. And you've got legislators that are introducing things all the time to stop fracking, which in effect stops the industry. What the governor's talking about in this upcoming session is a gas tax and a clean fuel standard, which is not in and of itself a tax, but translates to being a tax on consumers. And then she's also looking at a property tax that will fund clean energy infrastructure. So as she continues to push these somewhat unachievable requirements on all of us, it raises costs. So whether it's a direct tax or an increase of cost because of the policy itself, it's increasing our costs, and to me, that is a tax. And that has been her goal since she got elected. She wants to be the leader in the United States for green policy, and it's to the detriment of the state and the people that live here, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the clean fuel standards definitely one we'll be working on, and I think there's going to be a lot of proposals that in this 30-day session we're not going to like very much, Carla, so we'll have plenty on our plates. Now, the utility industry is another aspect of energy that I know you and the Business Coalition work on. And it's something that we've been very concerned about at the Rio Grande Foundation. Everything from the Energy Transition Act in 2019, which imposed all kinds of new mandates and green energy, so-called green energy on utilities like PNM. Then you saw the PNM merger situation with Avangrid. I know they've just appealed that to the Supreme Court, the decision rejecting that. And now you have a group of legislators who want to essentially take over government management of utilities, not just PNM, but others across the state. Can you just kind of generally speaking, share your vision for utilities and that important issue here in New Mexico before we get into this particular issue?
Well, you know, the utility companies that we have in the state are monopolies and therefore they're regulated. What they're talking about now, some of the legislators and others, is for a state takeover of our utilities. I can't even imagine that. It is just, to me, absolutely the wrong direction for our state. When you consider what the government has done to us through our governor with the lockdown over COVID, and then think about them controlling our utilities. Not a road I want to go down. We've done a lot of research. There aren't any state-controlled utilities that we've found in the United States. Nebraska is a little bit of a unique situation because there are no public utilities. They're all municipally held, and there are, like Oklahoma has a lot of municipal ones as well. But in the policy, this is interesting for Nebraska, it says that based on load, they can shut off the power to your hot water heater anytime they want. Well, what's to stop them from turning off the power to anything else? And when we saw the shutdown that I call it a lockdown, that we just went through with COVID, can you imagine giving the governor and government control over our utilities? Not something we want to do. So we'll be fighting that.
Yeah, no doubt about that situation. Now, in terms of statewide utilities, yeah, I think that is the reality. I don't know of any other state that owns all the utilities in its borders, but we do have government owned utilities here in New Mexico. I know the city of Farmington's an owner of their utility, and I believe Los Alamos, your government up there, is in charge of that utility as well. How is that similar or different in your estimation to what these legislators, and if you want to describe what exactly these legislators want to do with PNM and other utilities in our state, why don't you share that as well?
Well, currently we've got 3 public utilities. The rest of the utilities in the state, well, 3 public electric utilities, and then we've got a gas company. Others are currently handled by co-ops, which are regulated as well, but in a different way than the public utilities. Those that you talked about that are controlled by municipalities, those have been in effect for many, many years. And it's, to me, a different proposition for them to continue operation than to see other municipalities take over right now. And I say that because you look at what's happening in some of our municipalities, in particular in Albuquerque and Las Cruces, the larger cities, and Santa Fe. You've got in Santa Fe their inability to comply with their audit and other routine things. Can you imagine asking a city to take over a utility? So what these legislators are proposing is the first step that will be introduced on Wednesday, the 5th of January, that the PRC, the Public Regulation Commission, undertake a study to look at the state taking over our public utilities, or in the alternative, municipalities taking them over. that decision will be made, I understand, on January 12th by the PRC. Simultaneously, these legislators that are pushing the PRC for the study are also looking for ways to introduce legislation to support either the study or the movement to state or municipal controlled utilities. That is not a direction we want to see the state going. I would not want to trust my utilities in the hands of government right now, or at any time. I'm happy for Los Alamos and Farmington being successful with what they're doing. But like I said, they've been doing it a really long time. That's really different than asking a large city like Albuquerque, who is struggling and failing in many categories, such as taking care of our crime and safety, to ask them to take over our utilities. And at the same time, as I said, with the state, I don't want them controlling when I have power and when I have hot water. I think that decision should be left to the homeowner and the individual, and it's better left in the hands of companies that are well suited for managing our utilities.
Now, just to be clear, the city of Farmington, like I said, they're keeping or trying to keep San Juan Generating Station open. They, if anything, have been what I would call to the right of PNM in terms of defending consumers relative to the expensive green energy mandates and the Energy Transition Act and whatnot. But this proposal before the PRC by these legislators, they're not talking about consumer benefits. They are, this is all driven by a green agenda to try to first and foremost push, wind and solar and whatever other new sources of electricity into New Mexico and onto the grid. There's no consumer concern here as you see it. Is that an accurate statement?
That's the way I see it. They have one thing in mind, and that is green energy, which is fine, but their secondary concern is going to be money. As they continue to look at diversifying our economy, they're instead of addressing the needs of business to make it a place where business wants to come and the businesses that we have can thrive and be doing well, growing and creating new jobs, instead of worrying about that end of the puzzle that works very well for other states, they want to find ways to diversify the economy. And I'm concerned that their idea of moving to state-controlled utilities would provide that opportunity for them. And then they can raise our rates or do whatever, control our energy, as I talked about, things that I don't want them controlling.
Yeah, it's deeply concerning, especially in this time where it seemed like if government had a lever at their disposal to try to restrict people's behavior, they were pulling it and not shy about doing so. And having the government of the state of New Mexico completely in charge of our utilities is it definitely something that gives me pause and concern. City of Farmington, much different animal than the state of New Mexico. Any other issues on this in the session in utilities? Do you see further legislation? What did you think about the case on Avangrid? Do you think that was decided well by the PRC? Obviously, the PNM has appealed to the state Supreme Court on that. Do you see that as being successful? Where do you see this whole discussion heading?
Well, it's not over. They've extended now the agreement, from my understanding, where they are still looking to merge. Their first objective is going to the Supreme Court. It's interesting to me. If you have a private company and you want to sell it, you sell it. If you want to merge with somebody, you merge. As a utility, that is regulated, you have to get permission for that. I thought it was interesting the way that the case went. I used to be very, very involved in utilities and got out of that about a year ago, but still have an avid interest in how that went. I don't remember in the 18 years that I worked in that realm, a case where there was a denial of the ability for a company to merge or sell. It doesn't mean that it shouldn't happen. It's just, I haven't seen it. And maybe I've missed one. It was interesting to me, though. We have a situation in New Mexico where we have the Energy Transition Act, and we have 3 public utilities that are struggling to meet that. It's going to be very challenging. And I think in that merger, what PNM was looking for was a company that had the resources and the experience to maybe get them into compliance where they needed to be. It's a hefty lift. And that law, now the ETA is going to be challenging for all of us. I think we're going to experience some different things that we're not used to experiencing. And there's been talk about, will the energy be there when we need it? I think they have time to try to figure that out, but that's part of the reason why taking San Juan down, a coal generating plant, as quickly as they're taking it down, is going to be detrimental to the supply of power that we need in the PNM service area. And, there's other owners from the other utilities involved in coal that are getting out very quickly. And the state is not allowing them to build gas generation as backup, which is a much cleaner fuel than coal. It's leaving us in a really tight spot. So I think the decision on Avangrid merger with PNM is not over yet. I think that'll come back. There are some things that they could present differently in the case that may make a different conclusion. I really don't know that the hearing examiner, when he said to deny it, really thought that that would actually happen. I think that they were looking for more of promises and outcomes from the 2 companies that wanted to merge. And instead, the commission just denied it. So I think we're going to hear a lot more about that going into the future.
Yeah, I think it'll be hard for the court to override both the PRC and the hearing examiner, though, and I don't know. We'll see. You're right. It's something that a lot of folks support. There was so many articles, advertisements ad nauseum in the Journal and on TV in support mostly of this merger, and there's a lot of money at stake, that's for sure. So we'll see. Well, we can move on to any final issues in the legislature or any other things that you see, kind of as we preview 2022. Obviously, a lot of us are looking forward to November and really seeing if we're going to wind up being stuck with Lujan Grisham for another 4 years, or if New Mexicans are going to wake up and decide that we want to move forward in a more pro-freedom direction. But it's a fraught year. There's a lot going on, and the 30-day session is kind of an appetizer for the primary election and then the general election. How do you see things shaking out this year?
In the session, I think it's going to be really tough. I think we're going to see a lot more really bad stuff kind of crammed down our throats. But I'm seeing a movement for people like you and I, Paul, and other leaders that are center or right of center coming together and saying we've had enough. And I think that is going to be out of necessity that we come together and talk in a unified voice about what we want to see in the state and what we don't want to see. And that includes policy during the legislative session and the elections. So my hope is that there will be enough unity among our side. I think our side, as contrasted to the far left, that is on this, not just green energy, but growth of government takeover. Honestly, they're moving to socialism. In the business coalition, I have talked about that for years. That is their goal. Some of them now are looking beyond that to communism. And I know that may be shocking to people, but there's a lot of information out there about where they're moving, how they're moving, and what their end game is. I think that we need to wake up and smell the roses or the coffee, whatever it is that you're smelling, to wake up and know what's happening and the freight train that's coming at us. But those of us that don't believe in that, don't want to see government expanding to a full nanny state in New Mexico, I think that we far outnumber those that want to bring this to the table. But it's going to take unity. It's going to take us locking arms, talking together the way they do. They're very well organized. And that's what we've got to do. We've got a new movement called Better Together New Mexico. It's growing very well. We've got an outreach now of over 211,000 New Mexicans, and we are looking for more people. We're glad to be partnered with you on that, Paul, because I think it's going to make a huge difference moving forward. If we together decide what we want, we far outnumber the other side. We can have what we want. We've got to get people engaged, activated, and voting.
And if people want to get involved in the business coalition, or briefly describe what Better Together actually means, and if people can get involved in that as well, because I agree with you, unity is key. I think the number of very ardent left-wing progressive Democrats in this state is not that big of a voting bloc, but we have a lot of people who just vote for Democrats for historical reasons. We have a lot of infighting among conservatives and libertarian types, and the Republican Party. We could go on and on about the infighting that they have, but there's a lot of people out there who, if not unified by what they want to do, or at least unified, but by what they oppose in terms of the policies that we've seen over the last 3 to 4 years. So talk about Better Together and how people can actually get involved with the business coalition or that effort.
Well, we have our website, nmbizcoalition.org. Biz is B-I-Z, nmbizcoalition.org. And on our website, you can find a link to Better Together New Mexico and a survey. The survey takes about 4 minutes. And this is the information that Better Together needs in order to bring everybody together. Leaders of groups like Paul come together and have regular meetings talking about the future of our state and how we're going to affect the positive change that we need. So if you fill out that survey, it tells us where you live so that we can match your voting address to your elected officials and help you in that regard. It tells us what you're interested in so that we don't bother you on issues you don't care about. If you don't want to hear about taxation, we won't contact you on that subject. And then it tells us what you're willing to do. If you're willing to testify, if you'll walk for a candidate, put a sign up, we make it easy. And we won't ask you to do anything outside of your comfort zone. Paul is one of our leaders with a group of over 52 now, New Mexico leaders that come together and are defining how the state could move in a better direction and how we're going to get there. So Paul has the survey. He can send it to you. You can find it on nmbizcoalition.org. Better Together has a website that will be launched soon. It's its own entity with access to a lot of people. It will be putting out calls to action. So the people that are in the system will be notified on those issues of interest, and they can help us during the legislative session. Our calls to action are easy to fill out, takes you less than a minute, and your correspondence will go directly to your elected official and to the governor or whoever it's programmed to go to, the decision makers in the case at the time. So we urge people to get involved that way. Paul can also help you get involved because his organization is one of our bigger leaders in this whole initiative. I think it's going to make a difference, and we're glad to be partnered with Paul and others in doing this.
All right, thanks, Carla. Now, real quick, you've also you're involved in a media project, the New Mexico Sun. Can you briefly describe that before we conclude?
Yes, the New Mexico Sun News is a new platform, electronic newsletter, where instead of being subject to the far left liberal media that we often have as our only source of information, besides good sources like Paul is bringing you and others, we've got the New Mexico Sun, and they are attempting to do news that is objective and in the center, and definitely trying to cover both sides. But it's been a really good tool. Better Together New Mexico is going to be able to have more news, not published about it, but news that needs to be brought to the public's attention. So things that Paul in the Rio Grande Foundation, the New Mexico Business Coalition, Better Together, news that people need to know about where they're not getting it from another source, may be able to get it from the New Mexico Sun. At least that's our goal.
All right. Thank you very much for your time today, Carla. And we'll see you online, at least, as we head into the legislative session, and hopefully our paths will cross in person soon. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to this show at Apple, Stitcher, or have your Google Home play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.